Welcome everybody. We are a few minutes away from the beginning of the forum, so could you please take your seats? The candidates are sitting down the front here, and the audience, please take your seats. Thank you. Just. Good evening, everybody. Could I please ask you to take your seats? Must have been a long week. No one was moving. Please take your seats. Good evening, everybody. I'm Anne Maria Nicholson, and I'm your moderator tonight for this forum in the countdown to the federal election, which is only a week and a half away. This forum tonight has been co-hosted by the Northern Beaches Climate Action Network and the Voices of Warringah. But we begin today with an acknowledgement of country. Will Farrah, who's a young Aboriginal student from the Northern Beaches, will do the acknowledgement on behalf of everybody here tonight, including the candidates. Will.
Warringah. My name's Will Farrah, a proud Wiradjuri boy, blessed to grow up on Camaragal country, home of the saltwater people. Today I'd like to pay my respect to the ancestors, elders, past and present, as they have cared for the waterways, land and the skies, and community that have lived here for thousands of years. Today I'd like to ask those ancestors to care for the candidates and make sure they do the same as we did. To all my Aboriginal brothers and sisters here today, I'd like to give you a kind welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Will Farrah. The future is in great hands. Thank you all so much for coming tonight, and thank you to the candidates for making themselves available to answer all the community's questions. We thank you all for being present and being active participants in our local democracy.
Voices of Warringah was formed as a non-partisan forum to better enable community involvement in the electoral process and enhance community representation on local issues that matter. Voices of Warringah will frame this forum around issues of priority that were identified at previous kitchen table talks. At this election, Voices of Warringah had to lie low, no thanks to COVID. But at the next election, we will revisit this process and keep you informed via our website and through social media.
In short, the Voices of Warringah kitchen table conversations engage local people in a values-based discussion. We asked the community what they value most about living in Warringah, and hundreds of people chatted in kitchens, lounge rooms and gardens, sharing meals and views. Our participants told us that they loved living by the bush and the beach, the community sport in their areas, the friendly neighbours that they have, and the community spirit of living in Warringah. For most, the national issues of concern were the protection of climate and environment, a fairer policy for refugees, accountability and media transparency were all issues that were highlighted.
For within Warringah, the key local priorities were transport, overdevelopment and housing, healthcare and education, in particular early childhood education and childcare. At this election, we have undertaken an audit of the member for Warringah's performance against these key policies. The outcome of this audit is now available to view on our website via the link.
Tonight's forum will be live streamed and broadcast by Community Radio Northern Beaches and posted on YouTube following the event. This will record the candidates' commitments to all of you at this election. Leading up to the next election, we will audit the Warringah representatives' performance again and provide it to the community. Hopefully, we can also ensure that the voice of our electorate is heard by returning to kitchen tables and events in a COVID-free world.
Thank you and good luck to the candidates. We'd also like to thank Anne Maria Nicholson, an accomplished journalist and local author, for moderating tonight's event. Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, it's great to see the age limit lowered by about 3 decades. Excellent. Or 4. It's great to see everybody here tonight. You obviously all take democracy seriously, otherwise you'd probably be home watching other sorts of streaming like Netflix and the ABC News, I would think. So we invited all the candidates here tonight, and I'm delighted to say that 6 of them are here, plus 2 aspirants for the New South Wales Senate seats. So we'll be hearing from all of them shortly. And we're really grateful that everybody has made the effort to come here tonight. I love these town hall type meetings that people can hear for themselves what the candidates are like and what they would like to achieve on behalf of all of us here. It will be a open forum tonight for people from the audience to ask questions, plus I have already had quite a lot submitted here, which we'll get to later on. So how it's going to go is that shortly we'll ask the candidates to take a number out of a top hat. Look, we're not very arty here tonight, I hate to say it. One of our candidates, you will hear later, has actually been an actor and a singer, I think. And how wonderful would that be to have some arty politicians there? But our only contribution to a bit of showbiz tonight is a top hat over there, where the candidates will take out their numbers, which will decide the order that they will speak to you tonight. And then, as we heard already, that the Northern Beaches Radio will be live streaming this event, and you can tune into that by searching for Warringah Candidate Forum on YouTube. And also that will be broadcast again on Saturday on Northern Beaches Radio, and next Thursday a week away. So candidates, please make your way to the stage and via the top hat, and take your seats up here. Thank you very much. Just by way of explanation tonight, the candidates are seated in front of their photographs, but we didn't have confirmation from Katherine till a little later, so apologies for not having your photo there. And also we do have an apology from David Mickleburgh, who's unwell tonight, so he won't be joining us. Katherine Deves has drawn number one. So you are the first speaker. And you have 3 minutes, and you'll see a little prompt down there. So this is for the candidates to tell us a little bit about themselves and what they would like to do for us.
So just in case you didn't know, my name is Katherine Deves and I am the Liberal candidate for Warringah. It is my pleasure to be here. In my past advocacy, I have tried to be the voice for women and girls, but I am now standing to be the voice of Warringah. Even though I may not win your vote tonight, it is important that I stand here and I listen to your questions and I listen to your concerns and I hear about the issues that matter to you. Because if I'm going to be the representative for Warringah, I need to be able to take to Canberra what matters to you. I also want you to get to know me too. Most of you have likely only heard what the media has said about me and what they have decided to say. And they have done that with a view to selling newspapers and not actually spoken about the person that I am. I have issued 2 apologies that are on record. I don't believe it would be productive to traverse those issues again here tonight. I am here to listen, and I am here to take any questions that you may have. I need to assure you, however, that I will be acting in a dignified and respectful manner, and you can be assured that this whole process of this electoral campaign has galvanised me, not only in the commitment to act dignified and respectfully, but in how to conduct myself as your representative. So I am standing here as a lawyer, a mother of 3 little girls, and a wife. My husband has lived on the Northern Beaches for over 40 years. He was a police officer and is now a small business owner where he runs his trade. My 3 little girls go to the local school. We have been living here in this community for nearly 10 years. It is the place where we chose to raise our children because I believe it is the best place in the world to live. So the issues that are facing the people of Warringah, I have learned about as I've been out there on hustings every morning, 8 o'clock, in the rain, standing next to the buses, belching diesel. And invariably the issues that people raise with me are to do with cost of living. They are to do with small business recovery. They are to do with small business support. It is to do with health services. Most importantly, ensuring that we have enough nurses and doctors to staff our beautiful Northern Beaches Hospital. I am hearing about people concerned about mental health, most notably amongst our community of young women and older men. We are desperately in need of more resources to look after mental health. I am hearing about people concerned about aged care. So what I'm hearing out there is a wide variety of issues. Climate action is definitely one of them, but it is not the main concern for the people of Warringah that I'm hearing out there on the hustings. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Katherine. And our second speaker tonight is Stephen Tripp from Pauline Hanson's One Nation Party.
Hello everyone, my name is Stephen Tripp. I'm the One Nation candidate. It's my pleasure to be here and be surrounded by so many dedicated and engaged people. Even though we may not all agree, it's very important to have these events so that all sides and arguments are represented. My journey here tonight is not based on political ambition but necessity. I felt I had no opportunity but to run. Lockdowns and mandates were the first time I ever felt threatened by government. Politicians and unelected bureaucrats shut our businesses, stopped us from seeing loved ones, locked us in our homes and mandated vaccines that put good, hard-working people out of work. They did this without taking a single cent pay cut for themselves, all based on health advice that we are still yet to see. This action requires scrutiny. That is why One Nation is calling for a royal commission into the pandemic management. This should be the pandemic election, but they're not talking about it. What they're talking about is the possibility of a hung parliament. Now, if we have a hung parliament, I feel that Miss Steggall will be the Rob Oakeshott and Tony Windsor of Warringah. And she will hand this seat to the Labor Party. Now, it's not a big stretch because Rob Oakeshott and Tony Windsor are both adversary on the adversary council of the Advisory Council of Climate 200, who are funding Steggall's campaign. Surprise, surprise. It is clear that big money is no longer behind oil or coal. Now with all the taxpayer-funded subsidies, many billionaires are on the renewable bandwagon. It's no wonder that they are exerting their influence in this election. But what is more alarming is the fact that China supplies 80% of our renewables. If we allow Ms. Steggall and the other major parties to march us towards this shift to renewables, they will make us energy dependent on China. Now let me repeat that. We will be energy dependent on China. It doesn't stop there. Even the United Nations has expressed concern for the Uyghur population and others in China. which is used as forced labour to manufacture many of the components in the renewables. Worse still, the largest source of cobalt, which is the key component of lithium batteries, is the Congo, which uses child labour in their mines. So Zali, Steggall, the Greens and the major parties are pursuing a renewables policy that is built on the back of child and slave labour. We cannot depend on the practices of these countries. That's why One Nation will make Australia energy independent. If you really want to reduce emissions, then we need to seriously have a conversation on nuclear energy. The potential of small modular nuclear reactors is one that can provide cheap, reliable, dispatchable baseload power that will keep the lights on while keeping the costs low, and best of all, no emissions. So that's a lot to cram into in a short space of time, but One Nation also has policies to reduce congestion in Warringah, provide students with education, not indoctrination, reform family law, reform aged care, ban foreign ownership of our residential properties, and above all, hold government to account. Thank you.
So we're not fact-checking, by the way, as we go through. Our third candidate tonight is Katrina Paterson, who's running for the Animal Justice Party.
Thank you very much. I actually go by Kate Paterson, but thank you anyway. So my name is Kate Paterson and I'm the Animal Justice Party candidate for Warringah. Now, I first joined the Animal Justice Party when I learned about the horrors of the live export trade and I saw animals suffering on factory farms. Now, the Animal Justice Party is the only party that is brave enough to really talk about all the causes of climate change. The science tells us that the beef and the dairy industry are big polluters. Now, just for the record, my family are beef producers. We have had many conversations over the years about it, and we agree to disagree. But the science is here, it's real, and we need to change. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change tells us there's a lot of discussion on fossil fuels, but there's not much on the agricultural industry, the animal agricultural industry, and the associated deforestation. Now, the animal agriculture industry and deforestation account for 25% of all greenhouse gas emissions. That's a whopping 25%, and we don't talk about it. The IPCC are urging people to decrease their own carbon footprint. We don't have time to waste, and we cannot wait for governments to phase out fossil fuels. The AJP has policies in place to help farmers transform into more sustainable practices. The AJP also recognise that all Australians have the right to access good quality health care. I'm a registered nurse and a midwife, and I've worked in healthcare for over 35 years, and I've never seen it as bad as it is today. It's true, we are leaving in droves. My colleague said to me just this week, it is an industry that is dying. The average age for a registered nurse is 45 and a midwife is 54. So we need more people to come into the profession and plug up the gaps. It is not happening. We need policies in place to train nurses and midwives and give them incentive to come into the industry. We have very poor working conditions and very poor salary, so we need to do better. Thank you.
I would just like everybody to respect people here tonight. Everybody's come here in goodwill to talk to you, so please show a little respect. So here's a new face to this area, as far as I know. Dr. Shireen Morris is running for the Senate for the Labor Party, and she's representing Labor here tonight in the absence of David Mickleburgh, who's running for the House of Representatives, who's unwell tonight. Shireen is the woman I was talking about who has been a singer and an actor, but unfortunately she gave that away to be a constitutional law expert, and she's worked extensively on Indigenous constitutional recognition.
Hi everyone. There you go. I've been outed. I used to run around the Botanic Gardens doing Shakespeare and singing in bands before I went and studied law at Monash University. I also used to be a checkout chick at Bilo and an admin assistant temping to make ends meet. So I've had a variety of careers. My name's Shireen. I'm a constitutional lawyer. I work at Macquarie University. I've spent the last decade working on Indigenous constitutional recognition, working with the Aboriginal leader Noel Pearson, and I absolutely love working across the political left and right, building consensus for nation-building reform. I'm of Indian and Fijian Indian heritage. My parents migrated to Australia in the 70s. I was born in Australia. But look, the reason I'm standing for Parliament is that they would never have been able to make an amazing life for themselves and for my family and give me all the opportunities that I've been able to enjoy if they hadn't gotten scholarships to come to Australia and study medicine, work really hard and start a medical practice. And because of that, I've enjoyed so much opportunity, and that is why I absolutely love Australia. But I'll be really honest with you, I'm kind of terrified at the moment because everything I love about Australia is going completely backwards. We're talking about real wages going backwards, price of living going absolutely out of control. The thing that no one's talking about is education. Like, I benefited from a really good education, but no one is talking about education standards going backwards, backwards, backwards. And I'm really scared about what's going to happen with my young son's schooling. So that's why I'm Labor, because I know that Labor is the party of nation-building reform, of Medicare, of the NDIS, of the superannuation. Paul Keating opened up the Australian economy and created the modern Australian economy that was going along pretty well, but has been going downhill for the last 10 years. That's why I hope that you'll consider putting me into the Senate so I can help make politics about ideas again. Not about tribes, not about personalities, not about waste and rorts and corruption, but about ideas and making Australia a better country.
Thank you, Shireen. And our next speaker is David Shoebridge, who has actually been in Parliament for 12 years. He is the lead Senate candidate for the Greens in the federal election, a former barrister, but for the last 12 years he was a Greens member of the New South Wales Legislative Council.
Thanks, first of all, for the opportunity to come and speak with you tonight. This is an amazing opportunity to talk with the community here and have that interaction between those people who want to represent you and yourselves. So I'd first of all like to really pay my appreciation for that beautiful welcome and acknowledgement to country. It was absolutely gorgeous, and acknowledge that this land always was and always will be Aboriginal land, and commit my party to walk together with First Nations peoples towards voice and truth and justice and land rights. So thank you so much for that welcome. Well, look, this is a critical election campaign. And there are two elections, one for the lower house and one for the Senate. And if we want legislation to get through to deal with climate, to deal with fairness, it needs to pass both houses of Parliament, which is why we have the two Senate candidates here telling you about just how important that vote in the Senate is. The reason I have put my hand up to run for the Greens now is because we have this really narrowing window to deal with climate, to deal with fairness, to deal with justice in this country. We've listened to the science, not the conspiracy theories or the corporate spin. We've listened to the science on climate, and we know the window is narrowing. That's why I cannot believe that both the Labor Party and the Coalition are taking to this election a commitment to open up 114 new coal and gas projects across the country. That's just reckless, dangerous. That's like pouring petrol on a fire. If we're going to deal with climate, it starts with keeping coal and gas in the ground. It absolutely must start there. But we also need to have very clear commitments and targets for what we're going to do in 2030. Not 2050, but 2030, because that's the kind of time frame we need to actually get to 100% renewables and to have an exciting future for us and our kids. And think about the economic opportunities we get if we had that surge of investment in renewables. And instead of dirty power based on 20th century technology, we have an expansion of clean, green, renewable energy with the federal government helping rather than hurting in that space. That's an exciting opportunity. But we also want to see a national anti-corruption commission. We want to see a national ICAC with full retrospective powers to look at what this government has done over the last 10 years with public money. Why hasn't the coalition done that? Because they don't want that kind of watchdog at a federal level. I've been a state MP for the last 11 and a half years at a state level, and I can tell you, we bloody well need an ICAC at New South Wales level, and we bloody well need one at a federal level too. We have a whole suite of packages about dealing with cost of living, but one of the reforms I am most excited to get, and hopefully with Greens and the balance of power we can get, is to get dental and mental into Medicare. It should not cost $3,000 to $5,000 to go and visit a dentist. We have people literally travelling to Thailand to get their teeth fixed. We don't know why Medicare stops at your teeth. We want to fix that. And I'll finally say this. We have 10 days till we can wake up and change the government. And all of these reforms start with changing the government and waking up the day after the election and saying former Prime Minister Scott Morrison. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we have Kristen Glanville, who's running for the Greens for the House of Representatives. I should just tell you that she is also a councillor on Northern Beaches Council and is also a lawyer. We have a lot of lawyers. And she has a new baby, which is always a great thing to celebrate.
I moved to the Northern Beaches when I was 10 years old, and what I loved most about living in this area is that we coexist with nature. I was charmed as a child about lorikeets flying into our living room, and I'm concerned and scared that the quality of nature that I've enjoyed, that you've enjoyed, won't be enjoyed by future generations. We know that climate change is one of the most pressing issues of our generation. And I think that the Greens offer a holistic view of solving a problem like climate change. Climate change is often considered as a fairly discrete environmental issue, but it's broader than that. It is a democracy problem because the reason that we have climate change is the fact that we have billionaires and lobbyists distorting the political process in a way that means that ordinary views of people about climate change aren't making their way into climate change policy. It's also a problem of social justice because we know that people who are going to be most impacted by the impacts of climate change are people in the Pacific Islands, where it's low-lying, where they're low socioeconomic status. And we've also seen in recent extreme weather events that people in low-lying areas, people who are very vulnerable to the impacts of extreme weather. At the moment, we're trashing the environment so that a few billionaires can party on the way out. It's not acceptable and we shouldn't stand for it. As Greens, we have 4 key principles: the idea of environmental, ecological sustainability, grassroots democracy, grassroots participatory democracy, social justice, and peace and disarmament. And it's important as we grapple with the problems facing the next term of government to deal with all those things. We know that climate change is making the world a more unstable place. Things like food is becoming more scarce and more unreliable about how it will be supplied to us. We know that food scarcity is a key driver of instability in global politics. So I am running as a local lawyer. I'm a former disability carer, as a local mother, someone who lived in the area, to take to Parliament protecting our environment for future generations and also preserving our democracy from distorting impacts of lobbyists and billionaires who are distorting the democratic process.
And our next speaker is Andrew Robertson from the United Australia Party. There was a missing number. No, your dice has been rolled. And Andrew lives with his family in Brookvale. He's also a lawyer and he also has a new baby.
G'day. So my name is Andrew Robertson, and I think tonight is a good night for us all, I think, to agree on a few things. I think everyone in this room hopefully loves this country. I hope everyone here loves the environment, and everyone, I hope he loves people. And I want to see some solutions come out of this country that take care of those three things: our country, our people, and also our environment. And I think that what we've seen stifle this conversation for a long period of time are people pushing certain technologies rather than focusing on conservationism, our environment, and as a result we're making everything really difficult for a lot of people who are already struggling to make ends meet. In this country we have incredible resources. We have the most amazing and abundant natural resources that we could ever imagine. But at the moment, almost seemingly like we're being subverted by foreign countries, we're relying on some of the most expensive, unreliable and inefficient forms of energy. And not only are we relying on them, we're being forced to, we're actually subsidising these at the same time. I'm all for clean energy. Please don't get me wrong. I'm all for clean energy. I'm all for innovation in this field. But I believe the best way to prove these things work is by actually showing people technology and letting them partner with your idea or partner with your technology. Do not do it at the end of a gun. Do not do it by telling me I'm stupid or I'm not following science. Can I tell you, there are a lot of people in this country that will have an extremely difficult time ever following science again because of what has been rammed down our throats over the last 3 years. I'm being serious. There is going to be a crisis of trust in authority in this country. Because over the last 3 years, you've been sidelining people. People have been called lunatics, fringe conspiracy theorists, for seeing things with their own eyes and being told we're insane. Do not lose this climate argument the same way. Be reasonable. Appeal to us about the protection of the environment. We love it. If anyone actually knows me, I'm an amateur herpetologist. I love reptiles. When I was 10, I saw an eastern bearded dragon. My life changed forever. I was taking my dad to the Australian Museum. I am encyclopedic practically on Australian reptiles. I love our birds. Before that, it was fish and mammals in the ocean. I was obsessed with sea creatures. This is not about environmentalism or conservationism, because I challenge anyone here to like them more than me. The problem is, what I'm not seeing are these people that talk a big game doing wetland studies down at, say, Narrabeen Lagoon. Rather, they'll get on TV and they'll tell you what you should be doing with your energy consumption, what you should drive and what you should pay for. I haven't got any money to do it. How the hell are we going to do it in the future? It is insane. Our government has engaged in the most reckless expenditure over the last 3 years, and all of us are going to suffer through inflation. This is criminal. And I tell you, I nearly cry when I get my electricity bill. I'm contemplating candles. That's how bad it's getting. So give us a break. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And now Zali Steggall, who is our sitting independent MP for Warringah. She was born in Manly and lives in Balgowlah, North Balgowlah, with her husband and children. And Zali is an Olympic medalist and a former barrister. Welcome, Zali Steggall.
Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. It is wonderful to be back and to be celebrating democracy and having a lively debate, but more importantly, for us to be hearing from you, our community. Now, I would like to start by paying my respects and acknowledging such a wonderful acknowledgement of country and reaffirming that I accept the invitation to walk with our Indigenous and First Nations people and accept the Uluru Statement from their heart, and will do all in my power, if re-elected, to ensure we do enact that and make constitutional recognition a reality. Now, I'm a local girl, born in Manly, raised my family here, have had the incredible honour to represent our wonderful community for the last 3 years. And it has been a very interesting experience. I'm not a career politician, but I felt like so many of you, we cannot sit by and let our beautiful environment, our community, our economy go the way it is. We have to step up. We cannot be bystanders in this decade when there are so many challenges. So for me, it is all about the experts and the science. It is about being sensible. It is about putting forward solutions that can unite us rather than try and divide us. I am passionate about climate. I promised in 2019 to be your voice to Parliament and to ensure that we would have climate leadership in Parliament. And that's why I introduced the Climate Change Bill, a unifying piece of legislation that after inquiry had over 99% of submissions in support. It brought together the Business Council of Australia, the Australian Industry Group, it brought conservation groups, it brought civic society. This is how we need to move forward. It can be the solution. It's framework legislation that ensures we have risk assessment. We've seen over the last 3 years how exposed we are. We know from the IPCC reports that we do have to act in this decade. Over the last 3 years, bushfires and floods alone have cost some $10.3 billion to our economy. And that is without any resilience building or any adaptation. So we must act. And that is my pledge to Warringah, to continue to be a champion for climate. But more importantly, last year was a watershed in Australian politics as to the treatment of women. And the major parties, and in particular the coalitions, absolutely poor record when it comes to integrity and treatment of women. And I am absolutely passionate that we need to fix this. The gender pay gap must be addressed. You know that women over 55 are the fastest growing group for homelessness. That cannot be acceptable. And so inclusion, championing inclusion is incredibly important for me. And it was a privilege to be able to host the Independence for Inclusion float at Mardi Gras this year for the first time. So important for our young people in our community. Integrity, a Federal Integrity Commission is long overdue. $22,000 a minute is spent on fossil fuels in this country. It is unacceptable. We have had $55 billion worth of rorts over the last 3 to 4 years. So if we want fiscal discipline, we need to keep an independent Warringah to ensure you have true representation in Parliament.
Thank you, Zali. So we've heard all the speakers tonight, and we're about to move to questions. You can sort of feel the temperature rising, can't you, in the countdown to Saturday week. There's a bit of scaremongering, a lot of exaggerations, quite a lot of personal attacks, quite a few dirty tricks. I don't know if you've checked your letterbox lately. You can feel it in the air, and the stakes are high. So tonight's event is for the people of Warringah to ask direct questions of the candidates here. So when you do, please state your name and your suburb before asking your question. Please don't make speeches, it's a question. We have a roaming mic who will, so raise your hand if you want to ask a question. I've also got an enormous pile of submitted questions over here, so we'll try to get through as many as we can. You can direct your question to one or more of the candidates. There won't be time for everyone to answer every question, obviously, so I'll try and make sure there's a fair distribution of time for the candidates. Likewise, candidates, please keep your answers succinct. Not too much speech making would be appreciated. So I'm going to start the ball rolling with a question for Zali Steggall about preferences. Now, I don't know if many of you have been down to pre-poll, but there's quite a flurry there. There's lots of how to votes. And in a way, hers stands out because there are no directed preferences. So Richard Walker from Manly asks the question, why are you not preferencing anybody?
Thank you. And Richard, I don't know if he's here, but whereabouts? No, as an independent, I respect that we are a mature and educated electorate, and I respect your choice to direct your preferences as you would wish. But I ask for number one vote and then to number every box. I think it's important as an independent to be true to that independence. I'm here to be a voice for our community in Canberra, to break the status quo of major parties. But of course, our system requires you to fill out every box, and I respect your choice to do so. It's important that our voters be informed and understand understand this process. We don't have Stop the Lies is a legislation I introduced. We don't have rules about truth in political advertising, which is a real erosion of trust in government. There is a lot that can be done, but I do have faith absolutely in the people of Warringah to understand how to preface when it comes to their how to votes. And I should say a record number of people have been pre-polling.
Do we have a question from the floor? Up there, maybe?
This is a question for the member, Zali Steggall. My name's Robert and I'm from Lane Cove. Given your recent comments about eating bugs and vaccinating cows, when animal protein has the best protein profile for humans, would you elaborate or why you advocate this position and what's your favourite bug to eat?
Okay. I think I've probably been misquoted because I have never said anything such. But look, I think what you're getting at probably is our emissions and all the sectors in which we need to reduce our emissions, and it's why it's so important that at this election I'm pushing the 5 steps to net zero, that once passing the climate change bill, we need to move when it comes to our energy production, our industry, our transport and our agriculture. As has been said, we do need to transition emissions across all our sectors, but some are easier to do than others. And that's why we need to see an investment in innovation and in research and development. And it's something we're not seeing under the Morrison government. But I don't know where you got the quote about the bugs and everything else. I'd be very curious to know. Maybe that comes back to misinformation in political advertising.
There's been quite a lot of questions about housing. Alan Clark from Beacon Hill says there's a 20-year wait for public housing. What action will you take to reduce this? And Maya Anadek from Freshwater says, what do you intend to do about the housing crisis, especially for young people? And I'll direct this to Katherine Deves.
Well, the Morrison government in the last budget put forward the home deposit guarantee that will assist single parents, first home buyers, people buying homes in the regions and within our community to purchase a home, because oftentimes the first hurdle is getting that deposit together. So we have that support there. In addition, if I'm to go to Canberra, I would like to look at housing diversity within the community of Warringah to ensure that we don't encroach on our green spaces, but we use the land that we have most effectively, so we have a variety of housing solutions for the people of the community.
Also, I think Shireen would like to comment on that. Shireen Morris, yes?
Look, I just wanted to jump in because housing is something I'm so passionate about. And one of the reasons I and so many other people are so frustrated with the Liberal Morrison government is they're meant to be the party of individual ownership and property rights, but they've done nothing to facilitate the dream of home ownership for young Australians. You know, not everyone is lucky enough to have wealthy parents. And if we want action on housing affordability and making sure the dream of home ownership is not out of reach for young Australians, we need a Labor government that's going to put in place a shared equity scheme, fund social housing and affordable housing, and increase the housing supply, make sure there's fee-free TAFE to increase the tradie supply, because that's one of the key blockages in renovations and housing building. And if you put me in the Senate, this is something I'll work really hard at addressing. Thank you.
Market is actually broken, and more than 2/3 of young people have given up on the prospect of ever actually having their own home. And we've got to deal with the structural problems. And you know, you can talk what you like about housing diversity, but we have major tax problems, and we need to get rid of the capital gains tax concessions for housing, and we need to get rid of negative gearing to take some of the pressure out of the private housing market and reduce housing prices. That's hard reform, but it's essential reform. but it's only a tiny part of it. And we don't need 10 or 20,000 new affordable homes in this country. We've looked at the numbers, and the Greens know we need 1 million new affordable homes and public homes. That's the kind of nation-building reform that we're going to need to give those 2/3 of young people the chance and the hope to have their own home, to have a secure home. That should be a fundamental right in a country as rich as Australia, but it just simply isn't at the moment.
So we've got a question from the floor.
My name is Connie Harris and I live in Oxford Falls. Oh, that is a very bad insect in the background there. You all... Okay, maybe we just have to cope with this background noise. Most of you stated that you love the environment here. Oh. Okay. No,
Would you like to maybe come here?
Let me try it this way.
Okay. You got a big voice, Connie.
No, exactly. So you all basically stated that you like the Northern Beaches because of the wonderful environment. I would like to know what you think, how you can contribute to actually keep this beautiful environment. Everybody also talks about more houses and other forums. I heard about more roads are needed and we need, to accommodate more. But how are you going to see that you keep the balance and keep this environment? What do you think? How can you push that agenda?
Kristen, to start with.
My background as an environmental lawyer, and I can say that our federal environmental laws are extremely weak. As a practicing environmental lawyer, I rarely interacted with them, and that wasn't because I wasn't working on big projects. I worked on some of the biggest infrastructure projects happening in New South Wales. It's because our federal environmental legislation is inherently not fit for purpose. We don't have a proper environmental regulator that is cop on the beat actually enforcing environmental laws in Australia and ensuring that development is actually being assessed under federal environmental laws. Our federal environmental laws also only deal with a very narrow and weak set of principles. It only deals in very specific circumstances rather than grappling with bigger problems like cumulative impacts. It looks at individual developments and about their impacts, but it doesn't ask the question. It might say, what's the impact of one coal mine? But the problem isn't one coal mine. The problem is that we've got the cumulative impacts of 20 coal mines. So as the Greens, we have got a full policy suite of how we would overhaul federal environmental laws. We would create a new federal environmental regulator that is a cop on the beat. And I can say as a practicing lawyer in this area, the New South Wales EPA is quite a good regulator. And because of that, there is a lot more fear of God, essentially, in a lot of businesses out there. And I don't want to paint all businesses as doing the wrong thing, but certainly too many.
Zali, Steggall, would you like to comment on that?
Yes, I would. Thank you. A very important question, because we had the Samuels Review, which was a review into the Environmental Protection, Biodiversity and Conservation Act in this last Parliament. And what we saw the Morrison government do is try and ram that through with about an hour of debate, using the numbers in the House to stop amendments being moved, which I was moving amendments, to ensure the very recommendations of the Samuels Review were in place, which was that we have national environmental standards, as there is this push to cut what they call green tape. So the government is not committed to that environmental protection, but locally, our community stood up. We had the threat of the loss of our the Sydney Harbour Trust Federation lands lands, whether it was over in Mossburn at Tent Terminal or up at North Head. And it was the community that stood up and said to the government, these lands are not for development. They must stay true to their original purpose and for conservation. And so it is with vigilance from the community. You have to be mindful, or the government and the major parties will overstep and not ensure that protection of the environment. And so it is every one of us, our responsibility to stay vigilant.
Yes, Katherine Deves, would you like to comment on that?
Can I just say that with respect to the $40 million that went to the Sydney Harbour Trust, that did come under your predecessor, Zali. That came under Tony Abbott. Thank you.
Andrew Robertson.
Just, this might not be popular, but in terms of local issues, nearly cars and cats kill pretty much all of our native Australian wildlife. Foxes are pretty bad as well at North Head. So it's a tough conversation, but I honestly believe our children need to be educated on some of the actual threats facing our endangered species. Unfortunately, introduce, whether they're dogs, wild dogs or cats, up there at North Head. If you want to go and see some mutilated bandicoots, just go up there pretty much any morning, or if you want to see run over diamond pythons, go there March, and you will see them because they're trying to bask on roads and things like that. Some of the stuff is just keeping, or not even having a cat, neutering it, keeping it inside. Taking care of wildlife is not as hard as, it's not rocket science. Just be sensible.
Okay, we have a question from the floor now.
Yes, Brian Pearson's my name. I live in, long-time resident of Forestville. I used to work in the hospitality industry for the last 10 years until very recently, including doing business with this wonderful RSL that's hosting tonight. I wanted to ask all of you what you thought about lockdowns, vaccine passports, vaccine mandates over the last 2.5 years, whether you thought it was right or whether you thought it was wrong.
Have everybody answer that, but maybe we haven't heard much from Kate Paterson up there, so let's start with her.
I tried to make a comment about the last comment that Connie made about housing and our natural bushland here on the beaches. So just very quickly, I will get to the vaccination question in a moment. We have beautiful bushland here on the northern beaches, and we have developers ready to bulldoze our trees and build houses. Now, it's not sustainable housing, and it's not housing it's not low-cost housing. It is actually housing that developers are building, and they're multi-million-dollar houses. Now, we cannot allow this to happen on the northern beaches. We must protect and preserve our bushland. So the question about vaccinations. So I work in healthcare. Now, 2020 was a very, very scary time to work in healthcare. This was before the vaccinations, before the bungled rollout of vaccinations. Now, I worked in a hospital that is not on the northern beaches, but I can tell you in 2020, we were forbidden to wear face masks because the hospital would not pay for them, and they would not pay for them. Now, one particular day, I bought my own face masks and I wore it to work, and management came up to me and they told me I must take my face mask off or go home. Now, of course, as a midwife, I had 6 patients to look after and 6 babies, and management knew I was not going to take, they knew I was going to take my mask off and I was going to stay. So for me, the vaccinations were imperative for my safety, and I got vaccinated as soon as I could. Thank you.
Well, One Nation is the only party represented in Parliament that has introduced legislation to end vaccine mandates. That legislation was voted down by all the other parties, Liberal, Labor, Greens. So I just want to ask, what have vaccine mandates achieved? Apart from putting good people out of work like myself, I lost my job.
Can I just interrupt? Stephen, are you vaccinated?
No, I'm not, and I lost my job. And that is why I'm here tonight.
Zali.
Have you confirmed that you are negative before attending tonight if you are unvaccinated? So I'll take that as a no. I'll take that as a no. So, like, just so that we're very clear.
Excuse me. That man over in the blue, you're being ridiculous. You're behaving like a 5-year-old. Now, just keep it quiet. Now, Zali has raised a health issue here. I'm 4 times vaccinated. Very happy to be. And I'm just going to seek some advice on the club here about having unvaccinated people here. I'm not sure what it is. Check. Well, we have, and he said he's not.
1,291 adverse effects. Ban the jabs.
Excuse me, if you want to carry on like that, I'd really prefer you left the auditorium. Would you please go? Are you going to stop yelling like a 5-year-old? Are you going to stop yelling? Okay, well, it's your last chance, mate, okay? Good.
Am I going to get a question? She said she wouldn't allow me to have a question, so if I...
Well, excuse me, would you leave? We just gave you 3 chances, mate. Go. Just go. Go.
I'm not leaving. I'll sit here quietly. You'll have to carry me out, and I'll scream all the way. I'll be quiet.
Right, it's your last chance. I've already given you one last chance. Excuse me one moment. Did we just have a ruling about vaccination here? All right, so we're moving on to David Shoebridge. Would you like to make a comment about the vaccination and lockdowns over the last couple of years?
The medical advance that has saved the most lives over the last 100 years has been vaccinations. They have saved the most lives. It's been one of the most critical human advances that we've had. And we know that the vaccines have saved tens of thousands of Australian lives from the current COVID-19. We know that they have saved millions of lives across the planet. You can get your information on the fringes of the internet, or you can get your information in the mainstream of science and medical science. We take our information from the mainstream of medical science, not from the fringes of the internet. I've had 3 jabs. I'd get a 4th when I'm scheduled to get a 4th. And let's be clear, it is plain dangerous and reckless to spread this kind of information about vaccines. It will cost people's lives. We have to follow the science on this.
Right, moving right along, from candles to 3%. Andrew Robertson, how does the UAP practically intend to mandate 3% interest rates?
Yeah, it's just a power. So Section 51 gives you heads of powers for a federal government, and subparagraph 13 gives power over banking to the federal government. We used to have the Commonwealth Bank of Australia functioning as our central bank, and over time it's been progressively privatised. It was for a long period of time. Yeah, well, look, pretty much we've outsourced our monetary policy to a body that is unelected, and they target inflation between 2 to 3%. That is not going to be good for us, because our government has just printed trillions worth of dollars of money. It's gone into property prices. That's largely how most of our money is created, really. And what we're saying is in the future, any existing owner-occupied home loan will be capped at 3%, and all other interest rates can fluctuate in accordance with the market. But our priority as a party is to protect home ownership. This credit crisis has been created by our government lending irresponsibly. I would have to pay, I don't think it's pretty much 10 years paying no tax and I could pay off the balance of my mortgage. That's insane. I'm a lawyer. I see clients all the time that were buying properties in Seaforth for $60,000, which is something like, 4 times their average wage. Capital creation out of thin air has really robbed us all of our purchasing power, and you're all about to feel the pinch of inflation because of reckless governments.
So there's a lot of questions tonight on emissions, which is obviously something of great interest in this room. But here's one with a little bit of a twist from Rhys Duncan from Beacon Hill. With the large climate push for net zero emissions, how can we get there without nuclear energy? Who would like to pick up this one? Zali? Okay.
As part of the Environment and Energy Committee, I was part of the review into the moratorium into the ban on nuclear energy that was imposed by John Howard back in about 2001. As part of that inquiry, we went to India, we reviewed all energy sources and travelled around Australia to get consultation with our communities. What the difficulty is social licence when it comes to nuclear energy, and it is also the only source of energy that is not deflationary. So whilst every other source of energy, in particular clean energies like solar and rooftop solar and wind, are decreasing in price at a very rapid rate, as is the price of batteries, nuclear is the only technology that is getting more expensive as the years go by. So whilst the climate change bills that I've proposed is technology agnostic, at the end of the day, we need to get to zero emissions the most fiscally responsible way. The difficulty is nuclear takes too long and is too expensive. India, who has nuclear power, indicated to me it takes 18 years to get nuclear up and it takes 18 months to get large-scale solar up. And that's the difference. This is a race. We need to move quickly, and it will be with renewable solar, wind and battery for storage.
And Katherine Deves.
If we are going to have affordable and reliable energy, moving away from fossil fuels, nuclear has to be part of the question. But we have the most uranium out of all the developed nations. We could be a world leader in this space. There are small modular reactors that will be up and running in the next couple of decades. That will be able to be up and running in the next couple of decades. And that will be able to fill the gaps. I mean, if we're going to be relying on wind and solar, and we look at nuclear, it is emissions-free. It is carbon-free. It is going to be affordable and reliable. And we are going to have that. If we're going to be relying on 100% renewables, what are we going to do with all these solar panels that are going to be imported from China? In 20 years' time, where are we going to put them? In landfill? Nuclear has to be part of the debate.
Thank you. And Kristen, Glanville.
Thanks. Well, renewable energy is something I'm really passionate about. In a very ungreen-like way, I'm actually a director of a small business that crowdfunds solar panels. And I'm really enthusiastic about the way that solar energy is something that can be owned by communities and individuals. I think it's really problematic that things like coal-fired power plants can really only be owned by big corporations or billionaires, whereas any person in this audience can buy a solar panel and be energy independent, or they can invest in a community-owned solar investment scheme. We know that the technology exists for Australia to not only meet its current energy needs, but to actually export renewable energy in the form of liquid hydrogen. I've worked on massive large-scale solar projects, and I can say there are projects happening right now that don't rely on government subsidies. But you can sure as hell understand that for a new fossil fuel project to get up requires significant subsidies, and nuclear energy would likely fall into that category. People focus on the cost of building the plant, but there's also huge environmental costs of mining uranium, and that's First Nations country that will be trashed in order to get the uranium. People also forget about the huge waste problem created by nuclear energy. And to me, that's personally the most concerning thing. I've worked on a lot of projects involving huge amounts of waste. I've advised waste companies. the level of sophistication that we have at actually managing nuclear waste, which is some waste streams will be radioactive for tens of thousands of years. That's a check of dealing with that waste that we will be making future generations have to pay. So we know that the technology currently exists for us to use wind and solar. It's pie in the sky to say that we can rely on a lot of these nuclear technologies that are untested. And while there are countries using nuclear energy, they rely on places like Australia to basically put their trash.
Thank you. Sorry we can't let every candidate answer every question, but we have a question from the floor.
My name's Keela Lam. I live in Fairlight. And my question is to do with waste, including nuclear waste. On the Northern Beaches, we're really aware of the problem with waste. Everybody knows about the crap that's in our oceans and in our parks and on every road. And my question is, how are we going to deal with all this ridiculously criminal waste that industry is allowed to make and foist on us, and we pay for it to be dealt with at the moment going into tips, but the fear is that it's going to be incinerated, so-called waste to energy, which has huge problems. How else can we deal with this so that we don't have to go down the track of waste to energy incineration?
David Shoebridge.
Well, I'm happy to start on that. In fact, I was just in Lithgow this morning where the residents are deeply against having a waste-to-energy incinerator. The state government knows that it's toxic to have a waste-to-energy incinerator in Metro Sydney because of the dioxins and the heavy metals. So they're proposing to put it out at the poor old residents in Lithgow, and that's their solution to Sydney's waste. That is not a solution to our waste. The solution to our waste is reducing the waste at source, having the producers responsible for the waste and having a national waste strategy to greatly reduce the waste stream, not to entrench the production of millions of tonnes of waste and ship it off to somewhere like Lithgow to be burnt in a pretend environmental outcome. That is a disaster. And I've got to say, when you have the Liberal Party representative asked about nuclear energy and then tries to suggest that the waste stream from solar panels is somehow equivalent with the waste stream from nuclear energy, you get a sense of just how far from reality the discussion on energy and sensible national energy policy has come in this country.
Shireen first, and I think then Andrew.
Look, to be honest, if we want any kind of real action on the environment, on our oceans, on our rivers, on our forests, on our beaches, we've got to get rid of the Morrison government, right? That's what this boils down to. We need a party of government that takes these matters seriously. On climate change, you know, you've got one Liberal candidate saying that net zero, there's wiggle room because it's not legislated. You've got Matt Canavan saying that net zero's dead. They are incapable. They are held hostage to the far right, to the Nationals. They are incapable of taking serious action on this. You need to get Labor in there to take pragmatic and sensible action on climate change and the environment. Just today, Scott Morrison tried to bury a report on the catastrophic bleaching of the Great Barrier Reef. Now, Labor's got policies around cleaning up our oceans, tackling rubbish and plastics in the oceans, recycling plan, investments into cleaning up rivers, cleaning up the ocean, protecting the Great Barrier Reef. If I'm in the Senate, I will personally, passionately be fighting for these causes. So I hope you'll consider giving Labor your vote in the House and in the Senate.
So, Andrew.
Just really quickly, out of Rice University in Texas, there is some really interesting research and work being done on converting any carbon-based product, whether it's polyethylene, plastics that have been derived from processing hydrocarbons. They can turn it into something called flash graphene. Graphene is an incredible substance that can be utilised in so many areas. So I want to say there are some incredible chemistry solutions for what you're talking about. We're looking at really starting to recycling plastics in a new way that are going to make incredible inroads in the problem of rubbish. So I just really want people to be optimistic about what's coming out.
And Zali.
This is actually ultimately an economic problem as well, and we need to look at it from a point of view as a circular economy. We need to reintroduce some actually product custodianship from our manufacturers so that the problem is not foisted just upon consumers to have to deal with it. We're all familiar with the reuse, recycle, but if we have to move away from relying on so many plastics. Realistically, we're not going to get rid of them altogether, but big oil is such a major player in resisting that move away from reliance on plastics. So we do need government to be focused on innovation, on research and development, and how do we move past this reliance on these items that simply will stay around for long. We know microplastics are a major problem in the oceans. We know waste is a major problem, but you need the will to actually do something about it, not just sort of push it aside. There has been some progress when it comes to waste management, and I would argue at state government they are doing better than at federal government. I know it's probably not as much as you would like to see, I acknowledge that, but we have to move towards that circular economy of ensuring that custodianship around products. But could I also say, the major parties, the coalitions have us on track for 3 degrees of warming on their current policy, and with respect, whilst the Labor policy is better, it has us on track to 2 degrees of warming. And so if we are going to be true to the Paris Agreement and emissions reduction, you have to be looking at least minimum 50 to 60% emissions reduction by 2030. And that does moving away from plastics. We do have to look at those issues.
So I have a question here directed to the 2 Senate aspirants from Ros Madden from Mossman. Could the Greens please explain why they can't endorse the Uluru Statement in full? The Voices, Treaty, Truth in that order. How can they destroy this historical national opportunity achieved by painstaking consensus? So David Shoebridge first and then Shireen.
Yeah, so first of all, the Greens have made it very clear that if legislation comes to the Parliament for Voice, we will support that legislation, we'll try and improve that legislation, and we're absolutely committed to ensuring that we'll add our support to that. And Adam Band has made that clear repeatedly, and I repeat that commitment. When it comes to the timing, though, the Greens, led by the Black Greens membership within the Greens, and the Greens have 20% of our federal MPs, 2 of our federal MPs are First Nations women, and they have been very clear that they think we need a lot of truth-telling first to give the referendum the best chance, to give it the best chance to succeed. We need to tell the truth about frontier violence. We need to tell the truth about the frontier wars, the violence, the genocide and the dispossession against First Nations peoples. And that is probably an essential prerequisite to ensuring that the referendum on Voice succeeds. Because we haven't had that honest discussion as a nation, because it's not just in the past. I work with First Nations communities all around the state. The impacts of invasion and genocide continue with First Nations peoples daily in their lived lives. A young First Nations person walking down the street in Sydney has a vastly different experience to non-First Nations peoples, anxious about the police, anxious about their safety in public place. And we should acknowledge that and recognise it. So we absolutely commit to all elements in the Uluru Statement, but we do think the best chance of getting it through is by prioritising that truth, and that's why we've committed to $250 million to a Truth and Reconciliation Commission in this next term of government.
And Shireen Morris. No, these are for the senators, Senate aspirants, so Shireen.
Australia's never going to be a whole country, and we're never going to be fully at peace with who we are until we recognise the rightful place of Indigenous Australians in our Constitution. I've worked on this issue with the Aboriginal leader Noel Pearson for the last 11 years or so. There's a conception that he draws of Australia that I absolutely love, and that's Australia is the sum of three proud stories. First of all, there's the ancient Indigenous heritage that's written in the landscape and ebbs in the veins of our rivers and seas. And there's the very important British heritage that was transported here from England that created our democracy and the rule of law, and that's important too. And that's also the inheritance of all Australians. And of course, there's our multicultural achievement, right? The gifts of Australians from all over the world, which we now all share, makes us a richer country. Indigenous constitutional recognition is about bringing all these things together. Voice, treaty, truth, in that order, very, very important. And let me tell you, if we don't have a Labor government, this will not happen. Okay? Indigenous leaders have been trying really hard to work with all parties, but we need a Labor government. Labor have committed to implement the Uluru Statement in full and to put a First Nations voice in the Constitution, put that referendum to the people in their first term. But this will not happen if we don't vote Labor in. So if we want to do this very modest, just thing that Indigenous people are asking for, I implore you, please vote Labor in the House and the Senate. Put me in there to help me work with all the parties to help get this done. Thanks.
We've only got 10 minutes left, and there's so many more questions. But there's one from the floor up there.
I'm Isis from Brookvale, and my question is about the unemployment rate. We've been having a lot of talk about how low it is at the moment, but I just want to know how you are all going to, this is open to everyone, how you are all going to address gig culture and insecure casual work that so many Australians are facing, especially with the rising cost of living, because we can't be expected to be able to support ourselves, especially young people, with insecure casual work.
I'll start with Stephen. Do you want to have a crack at that one? Steve?
Couldn't quite hear that, sorry. So young people, I feel really sorry for young people. I've got 3 children of my own. My eldest daughter is in her late 20s, and I worry about the cost of living for her and what she's going to do. And I agree, someone said tonight that they feel sorry for children who don't have rich parents. And I feel sorry for them as well. I think we need to invest in more education for young people. I believe in free education. And just on that note, if you're a registered nurse and you want to train to be a mental health nurse, and we know that we need more mental health nurses on the Northern Beaches for our mental health crisis, it will cost you about $18,000 to get a certificate to work in mental health. And for that, you get the privilege of earning $1.50 extra per hour. So I agree, we need more education. We need free education for young people to retrain. And, yeah.
Stephen, Tripp.
No, well, it is an issue, especially with the unemployment rate. There's a lot of people that are working casually that are being counted as full employment, and when, they still can't get by because of the cost of living and everything like that. So One Nation does have an apprenticeship policy to encourage people to get an apprenticeship and have that pathway to get into the workforce. But we also need to address some cost of living, and house prices is a big part of that. One Nation is proposing that we ban foreign ownership of residential property, because we do have a lot of people from overseas nations coming in and buying up property here in Australia and in Sydney. They're just wanting to get their money out of their country, which is fair enough, but instead of coming in and buying one unit, they'll buy a whole floor. And the best example I give of that is the old entertainment centre down at Haymarket. They tore that down and they built 4 lots of new high-rise apartments. Well, one of them was 40 stories, and it sold out in 5 minutes because foreign investments would come in and buy the whole floor. So if we can ban that, we at least increase the supply a little bit, because it's a supply and demand issue. So it's another avenue of reducing cost of living, and that's One Nation policy.
Be good to start by getting the Manly Cinema back too, wouldn't it? Katherine Deves.
So with the Morrison's government's most recent budget, there are quite a number of investments that were made with respect to apprenticeships, also opening up, say, training places for, I think there were 15,000 training places in aged care. So with the Morrison government, it's very much focused on getting people into their jobs, which is why the unemployment rate is 4%. And also with respect to the gig economy, what we have been hearing is that people do appreciate having the flexibility of the casualisation, particularly if they're doing other things with studying and other caring duties. Thank you.
I can see the Greens are itching and Labor's itching. We'll have Kristen briefly and Shireen briefly.
Thanks. Look, I'm kind of offended by the previous speaker's comment that people are actively seeking out gig work, because it's just fundamentally not true. It's driven by this nasty last denominator kind of form of capitalism where every inch of money is being squeezed out of workers. So it's completely untrue that workers want to have that. Like, talking to young people, they want a secure job. They want to know that they're going to be able to feed their family, pay their rent or their mortgage. And the gig economy fundamentally doesn't do that. It just delivers profits to the people who are the owners. The Greens are proud to be a party that supports workplace rights, and that's unfortunately been something that's been abdicated by Labor in recent years. We fundamentally support the rights of workers to go on strike. We've supported real wage increases, and to be honest, in the debate about housing affordability, the elephant in the room is that our wages have not had any real increase in the way that housing has been increased, because we have awards set by the bosses these days rather than having the unions having the power that they should to actually defend the rights of workers. So we're proud to be a party that supports the rights of people to actually have a living wage.
Just make it fast, thank you.
Well, thank you for your question up the back, and I hope you heard the Liberal candidate's answer, because that reflects the Liberal Morrison government's position. They do not care two hoots about your insecure work. They do not care two hoots about gig economy workers who are struggling, or people who can't make ends meet to feed their kids and get by at the grocery store. Now, Labor is the only party that's going to enshrine secure work into the Fair Work Act. The only party that's going to put gender equity, pay equity for women and men into the Fair Work Act. If you want serious action on wages, on secure work, on gig economy exploitation, you have to put Labor into government. And I hope you are all as fed up of Morrison and his candidates who are not listening to a word you say. Get them out.
We've got a slide extension, so the question up there.
Hi everyone, my name is Sasha Dansborough. My question is to all of you, or as many as we can get. I live with a disability, and my question is, do you have a plan to make the NDIS inclusive of people with disabilities, so that people with disabilities' voices are heard while implementing the NDIS plans?
Zali, Steggall.
Thank you. And so incredibly important that you're here and having your voice heard. We hosted a forum on the NDIS review that was planned by the government in relation to introducing independent assessments, and they were resoundingly rejected by NDIS participants. And overwhelmingly the feedback was that we needed a more caring system, a system that isn't automated, but a system that actually addresses needs. But it is an incredibly expensive system, and we need to make sure your needs and needs of all those in the NDIS are actually met. And that does mean we need to make sure we stop having, for example, yearly assessments. People that have ongoing conditions should not have to be producing the same kind of bureaucratic assessments and medical expert reports to repeat the same thing, to continue with their plans. There should be more explanation around what's happening with plans, but we also should see more inclusion of people with disabilities. It's been such an exciting year, I think, this year, that our Australian of the Year is such a leading person and such a role model and example. We know everyone in our society has such an important role to play and contribution. So it's incredibly important that we remain some vigilance when it comes to the government on NDIS. I am incredibly concerned at cuts predicted by the Morrison government and the attempts at downgrading it and impacting the system that it no longer assists the ones that need it the most. We have a number of issues with it though. We have age discrimination in the NDIS for people when the interaction between NDIS and aged care. We know the Royal Commission into Aged Care and Disability highlighted so many issues. It is a complex system, but it's one where we need to have caring at the centre of government decisions.
Okay. We've got another question from the floor.
My name is John. I'm from Manly Vale. I want to ask a question of anybody in the panel that's prepared to answer it. There is something missing in this campaign, one of the most trusted institutions in Australia which brings communities together all the time in emergency and in normal times as well, the ABC. The Prime Minister has refused to allow the ABC to conduct a debate. There is denigration every day from not only the Communications Minister, but also other ministers in our government to cut the ABC out of the cycle and give it to Murdoch and his media. They handed $40 million to Murdoch to paywall women's sport when the ABC could have received that funding to help in women's sport. I want to ask, perhaps Katherine Deves, you'd like to give us your impression of where the ABC should stand in the firmament of communication in this country, which has served for 90 years.
Murdoch sucks.
We have a free press. We have the ABC that is amply funded by the federal government. They receive... Morrison dedicated a large sum to the ABC in the most recent budget. And should it be chosen that these debates be held on other platforms, then that's the choice that was made.
So now, Zali, Steggall, now I'm going to ask a question on my own behalf, and I make a declaration that as 20 years at the ABC as a news and current affairs reporter, as was Katherine Deves, campaign manager, in fact, was a news and current affairs reporter at the ABC. I happen to know, with the ABC alumni, that the funding to the ABC has been cut by the equivalent of $100 million a year, every year, since 2013. And that is what is needed to bring it back. So I would ask Zali Steggall, as the incumbent member, would she support that restoration of funding of the ABC?
Thank you, Anne Maria. I do. I support the restoration of funding. And in this day and age, if you think of the last 3 years, the role the ABC has played in keeping our communities safe, from bushfires to floods, it is our regional radio, it is the ABC that has kept communities connected, informed and safe in really dire situations. But more importantly, and it's a question that was raised with me at a forum recently, our soft diplomacy in our region in the Pacific was incredibly influential, was the radio, our ABC radio, was incredibly important in having our presence in so many of our neighbouring countries. And these are all things that have been cut with the underfunding of the ABC. So while we talk security in our region, and I know the Morrison government is big on talking about that, it's really important to understand the role a free ABC, a free press plays. It was only the week after the 2019 election that we saw journalists' homes being raided on orders of the government ministers and the AFP. That is a huge attack on our free press. And so it is incredibly important that our national broadcaster be fully funded and we maintain, for democracy to work, you need free press. If not, it's propaganda.
And David Shoebridge.
It's a fact that the Australian public trusts the ABC a hell of a lot more than they trust the federal parliament, and they're right to do so. And the Greens not only support the restoration of all of those cuts to the ABC's budget, but then on top of that a 10% increase in the budget, because the Australian population and the complexity of the job that the ABC has to do with digital media has grown substantially. So their job has got harder and more difficult, and the Morrison government has attacked their budget year after year after year. So we not only have to restore the funding, we need to increase the funding so the ABC can have that strong digital footprint. And the other thing I'd say about the Morrison government is they haven't just attacked the funding of the ABC. They've tried to attack it as a core Australian institution, attacked its independence, attacked its integrity, and the most recent example that you're right to point out in your question, refusing to allow a debate on the ABC, while instead they had a debate on Sky News. I mean, it just sums up the Morrison government in detail. We need to protect the ABC, refund the ABC, and you know, if the ABC had the same funding per capita as the BBC, they wouldn't have a fund of about $1 billion a year. It'd be $2.5 billion a year. People love the BBC. We should love the ABC every bit as much.
And lastly, Shireen, but quick. And then I think we're up to our last question after that.
The ABC is an absolutely essential institution and we've got to protect it. It's absolutely correct that the Morrison government is decimating key institutions of Australia. They've stuffed up the whole thing with the Solomon Islands and China. France hates us. You know, why are we allowing this to go on? It's got to stop. We must protect the ABC and restore it to its the position that we know that it deserves in our democracy. Thanks.
So we've got one question at the back, and I think our very lovely Nigel Howard has already given us an extra 10 minutes. I think we're out of time, but one more question up there.
Good evening, everybody. My name's Rachel. I'd just like to acknowledge I'm not an independent or a Greens, but Zali Steggall has worked with me on projects before, and I'd like to thank her before I ask my question. And Kristen is a friend of mine, and we're also working on projects together. So my question is, I stand here on behalf of the community. I'm here for the Northern Beaches, and it's not a particular question to any particular person. But when I come to forums like this and see things on the news and stuff, I can't identify with politicians in general. And this is not to anyone personal, just myself. And I often see things like homelessness, abuse, rape, you know, things that go on that I've personally experienced, having a disabled child, you know, and I'm thankful for the NDIS, but I agree with you, sir, over there, that, you know, we've got a long way to go, and I thank you, Zali, for that comment on the NDIS, because it is exhausting every year trying to prove that your child doesn't, you know, has got the same disability that he had last year. But, you know, what I hear when politicians are speaking is they're saying they want to stop bullying, they want to help education, they want to stop domestic violence, they want to help people come forward and tell their story. But when people come forward, you know, life can be a lot harder. They're on the waiting list for 20 years. I've been in my car with my 3 kids on the Northern Beaches. I've been homeless twice, and I advocate for homelessness. But what I don't understand is when people like me and people that I represent talk about all these issues, when our elderly people in this area are living in a home that's, you know, not in a good situation and they need nursing care and they've gone off the system, no one's noticed them because GPs are underfunded and stuff, is where do you stand when it comes to saving the environment, but we want to help people get home? Because I feel the vibe sometimes is, well, if you can't afford to live here, then go. So where are we meant to go? The people that can't afford, the people like you guys that don't have great rate wages, the young people, my kids that are going to university, where are we meant to go when politicians say, oh, you can go everywhere, but you can't live on the northern beaches? And that's the question I'd like to ask is, what are the everyday people on the northern beaches meant to do when we can't afford to live and we've escaped violence or whatever?
Okay, thank you, Rachel, and thank you for your bravery for coming here tonight. It was a bit more of a speech than a question, but as Zali is our local member, over to you.
Thank you, Rachel. And you have raised a number of incredibly important issues, from domestic violence, homelessness, and affordable housing. These are all really acute problems. The difficulty, we need to work with all levels of government, whether it's local government, state government and federal government, to ensure from a planning perspective that we are ensuring we've got inclusive building, we have more affordable housing that's being built to ensure we are meeting the needs of the community. Now, the Greens have a very ambitious plan in terms of building and housing that, you know, with respect, Labor has a plan for about 10,000. We need to look at a more holistic way to the model, because it has to be a question around affordable housing. It has to be for social housing to ensure we're assisting those. I think the support payment from a housing support needs to be increased to ensure you can meet rents. We need to provide more security of longer term rents, for example. But we also, there is a ricochet effect of how this all interacts in our society. And we have to actually come around the table and put solutions in, rather than saying it's a hard problem but let's build out in Western Sydney or somewhere else. Because I agree with you, frontline workers, teachers, nurses, we need everybody to be able to live in our community. But we do have a paradox, because on one hand, we don't want to overdevelop, we don't want to build more, but at the same time, we then have housing shortage when it comes to affordable housing. So for me, it's been about working with local government and state government at putting in place some ratios, for example, of certain builds when it comes to developments have to have some element of affordability. But also it is the support networks on the ground. When it comes to domestic violence and homeless services, we were able to get pop-up services, which is a horrible way to describe it, during the lockdown periods, because domestic violence and homelessness risks increased, but we need to do that on a more permanent basis.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry, but we are out of time. We could go for another hour, but we can't. And I'd just like to thank all the candidates. We live in actually a geographically tiny area, but what an incredible diversity of people we have here tonight, and an incredible diversity of opinions. So hopefully tonight can help you make a decision about the way you want to vote. The voting, as we know, is happening now and right up every day, right up to polling day on Saturday week. A big thank you to our candidates for showing their respect by coming here tonight to the voters. All of you are invited to stick around if you want and network. The place is booked till 9 o'clock. So make yourselves at home, say hello to people. Man in blue can probably now shout. And but before we wrap up, I want to. Actually, I spoke too soon, didn't I? Shut up. I'd like to welcome to the stage now Nigel Howard, who has done most of the hard work of getting us all here tonight, from the Northern Beaches Climate Action Network, for some closing remarks.
Thank you so much for all coming. It's not often. I've got a Chinese wife, a Chinese stepdaughter and a Chinese stepmother, so I practically never get the last word, so I'm really going to milk it this evening. So how many of you have heard of the Northern Beaches Climate Action Network? Hands up. Some on the stage even. Yeah, there's a few of you. Okay, so let me tell you what NBCAN is. It's an informal network of climate active groups. I better put my glasses on, hadn't I? Oh, that's what I was going to say. So, informal network of climate active groups up and down the Northern Beaches. So, hands up again. How many climate active groups do you think there are on the Northern Beaches? Do you think it's more than 5? Yes. More than 10? More than 15? More than 20? More than 30? More than 40? More than 50? These people are right. There are 47 climate active groups up and down the Northern Beaches. That just astonishes me. So let me tell you what NBCAN isn't. It is not non-partisan. Ooh. Ooh. We are not non-partisan. We are polypartisan. We invite every strand of political opinion to contribute to every single thing we do. We invite everyone, even people that, you know, we might not always agree with. We invite opinionated independents, Greens, Liberals, Labour, Communist or Fascist, as long as you tell your truth and you're prepared to defend what you say with integrity, even people we may disagree with. NBCAN is not yet another organisation. We have no money, no board. We don't compete with our network of groups. We coordinate and boost activities and we fill the gaps. We coordinate action where individual groups don't have the firepower or would be conflicted. Together we can make stuff happen. So this event is brought to you by Northern Beaches Climate Action Network and Voices of Warringah. So now I want to thank some people, and I want to start off by thanking the organising crew. Everyone who's wearing a beautiful I Love Northern Beaches t-shirt has contributed to bringing you this event, so give them a big hand, please. If you see them lingering, hopefully by the bar, please buy them a beer. But if it's someone from Voices of Warringah, then you'll have to buy them a good champagne. Voices folk are much posher than us. So I especially want to thank our partner Katherine Ridge and her team from Voices of Warringah. Stand up, take a bow. What you've done is you've taken this NBCAN event to a new level of professionalism and sophistication. Look at you all sitting in rows instead of lying on the grass outside the Narrabeen CEC. But don't worry, NBCAN's normal hokey service will be resumed as soon as possible. So lastly, I want to thank Climate Action Networks Australia and the Nature Conservation Council, who've greatly helped us with these events. And just mention a few of our crew. We've got people who recognise themselves in this description. Take a bow. We have people from People of Mackellar, people from Stop Adani, people from Get Up, people from Loosely Woven. We have people from Labour, Greens and Independents, and we even have a failed Liberal politician who stood for pre-selection against Jason Falinski. Stand up and take a bow, Alan Clark. I think you'd be hard pushed to call this crew biased. Next, I want to thank the most important people here, and that is all of you. Every 3 years, politicians remember that they need your votes. They care what we think for a little while. So enjoy this last 10 days of being courted by our candidates. Next, I want to thank the candidates themselves. It's an incredibly brave thing to nominate, and an even braver thing again to face the community at a forum, and a braver thing again to actually act as our representative in Parliament. So thank you all, both for standing and for everything that you do in our community. Lastly, and most especially, please stand up and give a standing ovation for Anne Maria Nicholson. Anne Maria Nicholson. She's done a fantastic job. We have a little gift to thank her for her brilliant moderation. It's champagne, so you can tell she's more voices than a canner. So get ready for the phone call, Anne Maria, from ABC, because you'll be moderating Q&A next. So I think most of our candidates are going to hang around for a while and answer those burning questions that you didn't get asked. We couldn't fit into the programme. Voices of Mackellar, Northern Beaches Climate Action Network, and some of our groups are around the room if you want to go and chat to them. Thank you all so much. Grab a beer and start chatting. Thank you.